Let's speak now to the Work and Pensions Secretary, Pat McFadden, who joins me now. Very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning from Liverpool.
Rate the Prime Minister's performance yesterday out of 10. Honestly, don't say 10 because it wouldn't be honest.
Of course I'm going to say 10. I thought it was a wonderful speech. And 10's not impossible. I thought it was a really good speech, and let me tell you why. I think two things in particular. One, a sense of fight back that I think that the party has wanted to see after some difficult headlines and stories in the earlier part of this month. And the second word that struck me as I listened to it was belief. His strong sense of belief in the UK, what makes the country great. He spoke about the community spirit that we see in the country every day, some of the great creativity that we have, some of the great industries we have. A speech that was really proud of Britain. So I think it lifted the hall, but more important than lifting the hall, I think it communicated a real hunger for more delivery to the British public.
I think one of the other big themes was sort of decency versus division throughout the speech, and suggesting that he and you and your government take the side of decency and accused Reform in particular of taking the country down a line of toxic division, I think was a phrase that was used a couple of times. I guess it's interesting that comes at the same time that your Deputy Prime Minister, for example, if we put aside just using the word racist by the Prime Minister and many other ministers during the course of the week, the Deputy Prime Minister this week accused Nigel Farage of supporting the Hitler Youth. Is that not hypocrisy there, clear and simple? He said flirting with the Hitler Youth.
Look, let's focus on what this debate about decency or division is about. You've had two big political events in the last week. One is our conference, which we're coming to the end of today. The other was this press conference that Nigel Farage and Reform had last Monday. And at that press conference, he threatened to take people who had come here legally, worked here legally, paid tax here legally, made a big contribution to the UK, and rip up their settled status and threaten to deport them. That is not the British way. It isn't a decent thing to do. And it's really interesting to me that in all the controversy of the last 24 hours over who said this or who's calling this other person this, you haven't had a defence of that policy from Reform. And I'll tell you why you haven't had a defence of it is because they know it has gone too far. And if they did it, it would contravene Britain's sense of decency, because Britain doesn't go back on its word. That's not the British way. It's not the right thing to do. And I think what we've seen in the last 24 hours is a lot of protesting rather than having a debate about the substance of that policy.
Well, then, I know you've been busy this week. Then you haven't been watching this programme. We had Zia Youssef on Monday, and we had a long discussion about the policy. We're going to have him on again today, and we'll continue that discussion. But with all due respect, Minister, you completely ignored my question. If you are, as a government and the Prime Minister leading this, criticising people for lowering the tone of the debate and taking us down a path of toxic division, do you not condemn your Deputy Prime Minister for accusing Nigel Farage of flirting with supporting Adolf Hitler?
Well, look, I think David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, has made further comments about that himself, and I used the old phrase from politics about playing the ball and not the man. That is the best way to do these things. So I think it's better we focus on policy. And as I say, when you do focus on policy, that's when we realise that last week's policy announced by Reform went way too far. And I don't want to see people
Forgive me, Minister,
who've come here legally worried about their status.
Forgive me, Minister, you said that already, and that's not what we're focusing on here. He did say you should play the ball, not the man, yet he played the man. He didn't issue an apology. He retracted the comment and then reiterated the point that he says he likes to play the ball, not the man, while continuing to say that people can make their own judgment about Nigel Farage. He hasn't apologised for the statement. Do you condemn that he made it?
No, I've got nothing to add to what David Lammy himself has said on this. And as I say, I'm focused on the policy. David Lammy said what he said. He issued another statement last night, and I don't have anything more to add to that. But
do you understand
and we
how
can
that
chase
can
around
seem...
these comments.
Well, yeah, I know, but you as a government, starting on Sunday when the Prime Minister said that reforms policies are racist, started this debate. And when we use these words, we absolutely must make sure our arguments are accurate. So you guys started this debate. We are chasing around the words because of that. And can you not see how people will see this all as hypocritical when the Prime Minister gives a speech yesterday to say we've got to take the heat out of these things, we've got to rise above toxic division, and you won't condemn someone labelling Nigel Farage as potentially flirting with Adolf Hitler?
No, I think there's something else going on, which is why I returned to the answer that frustrated you a moment or two ago. I think a lot of reforms protesting about this is because what they don't want to talk about is the policy they announced last week. And the policy they announced last week was a deeply un-British thing to do, which is to break your word to people who've come here legally and done nothing wrong. It was a bad policy. It was a mistake. They don't want to defend it. And so what they do when Keir Starmer makes a speech is issue lots of protests about he's called them this or he's called them that. Let us focus on the substance here of what has been announced, because we're going to be having this debate in a big way over the next few years. And the importance of Keir Starmer's speech yesterday was he wants to have this debate. He wants to stick up for an optimistic, future-looking vision of Britain against those who say that everything is broken, everything's terrible, because the last thing that they can really admit is that the country is a great country at its heart. Yes, we have some challenges, but in government we are fixing them. That's why we're putting more money into the NHS. That's why this week we've announced new policies to get young people into work. That's why we stepped in to save manufacturing jobs in the West Midlands the other day, and all the other things that have been announced at this conference over the past few days.
Well, I'm going to move on to the other topics, Minister, but to be clear, you are reverting to what you're saying Reform wants to talk about when you ignore my questions, and Reform in no way dictate the questions I'm asking. So you're actually ignoring my questions, legitimate questions, and I will be putting my own legitimate questions to Zia Yusuf again today, as I did earlier in the week. So I don't think it's fair to dodge questions and suggest we're doing what Reform wants by ignoring the policy at hand. Let's talk about what you're announcing today. How does it add to the gist of what Rachel Reeves was announcing earlier this week to give young people a place in work and a qualification that gets them there?
Oh, this is really important because what I've noticed since becoming the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions a few weeks ago is there are far too many people, young people who are not in work or education or employment. So we've announced a very important youth guarantee policy this week to make sure that everyone's offered a decent place in training, work experience, or an apprenticeship, or ultimately even a job subsidy, because the last thing that we want is people graduating from school onto benefits. We're about giving people a chance in life, and I think you've got to start with young people, because if people get onto benefits after they leave school, the danger is they get into that habit, they never get a chance to find work, and that's a tragic story in life. And there's no reason why it should be happening, because we've got major investment projects coming up in the country. We're talking about building more houses, about an energy transition, about improving the transport system. Big investments happening both in the public and private sectors in the UK. Let's train our people, and train our young people in particular, to do those jobs.